The Galactic Council chambers stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floor, its walls displaying the homeworlds of 47 different species. Ambassador Krell of the Vaxon Empire stood at his station, his 4 arms clasped behind his back in the traditional posture of concern. He watched the humans enter through the far entrance, and despite himself, felt his breathing tubes constrict with instinctive fear. There were only 3 of them. Captain Sarah Chen led the group, flanked by her security officer and a junior diplomat. They walked with an easy confidence that made Krell's scales itch. The other ambassadors shifted in their positions, and he knew they felt it too. That inexplicable dread that humans somehow inspired in every species they encountered. "I don't understand it," whispered Ambassador Thawne, a crystalline whose people were known for their logical minds and emotional control. "They're small, weak-looking, no natural weapons, no armor plating, no venom glands. Yet when I look at them, every instinct I have screams danger." Krell hummed in agreement. "It's the same for all of us. The Galactic Survey classified them as a Class 7 civilization when we first made contact. Standard technological development, nothing exceptional. But the fear rating was off the charts. Every species that meets them reports the same thing." The human delegation reached their platform and took their positions. Captain Chen smiled and nodded to the assembled representatives. It was meant to be friendly, Krell knew. Humans smiled to show goodwill. But those teeth, those flat, grinding teeth with the sharp canines barely visible. Predator teeth hidden in a primate's mouth. "Honored Council," Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix. "We appreciate this opportunity to address the recent concerns about human expansion into the outer reaches." High Counselor Vex, an ancient Methron whose people had governed the council for 3,000 years, raised one of his sensory stalks. "Captain Chen, we must be direct. In the 200 years since humanity joined the galactic community, your species has established colonies on 42 worlds. This is more than any other species has settled in their first millennium of space travel. The Council is concerned about your expansionist tendencies." Chen's expression remained pleasant. "With respect, High Counselor, those worlds were unclaimed and followed all settlement protocols. We've been very careful to honor galactic law." "That's not the issue," Krell found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "Captain, perhaps you can help us understand. Why do you inspire such fear? My people are warriors. We've conquered 17 systems. Our bodies are living weapons. Yet when we face humans in negotiation, we feel like prey." A murmur ran through the chamber. Other ambassadors voiced their agreement. It was the question everyone wanted answered, but none had dared voice so directly. Chen looked at her companions, then back at the council. "Honestly, we don't know. We've wondered the same thing. From our perspective, we're one of the weaker species in the galaxy. The Vaxon could crush us in direct combat. The crystalline are smarter. The Methrons have technology we can barely understand. We're just trying to survive and build a future for our people." "Perhaps," said Thawne slowly, "that is precisely what frightens us. Your people seem driven by something we don't understand. You colonize hostile worlds that others would reject. You venture into dangerous regions of space without hesitation. You have a saying that your junior diplomat mentioned in a recent cultural exchange. Something about rage and dying light? Do not go gentle into that good night," the junior diplomat supplied quietly. "It's from an old poem. It means we should fight against death, against entropy, against the dying of everything we care about." Krell felt his scales ripple. "You fight death itself? This is your philosophy?" "It's one of them," Chen acknowledged. "We have many philosophies, but yes, resistance to the inevitable is something of a human trait. We don't accept that things must be a certain way just because they've always been that way." The High Counselor's stalks waved in agitation. "This brings us to the real reason for this meeting. The Dravak swarm has been detected in the outer reaches. They're moving toward council space. This is the 7th time in galactic history that they've made such an incursion. Each previous time, the Council has evacuated the outer colonies and surrendered those systems to the swarm. The losses are tragic but acceptable. It takes the Drawback approximately 300 years to consume those systems, and then they return to deep space. This is the natural order. Chen's friendly expression faded. You're telling me that your solution to the Drawback is to give them entire star systems and wait for them to leave? There is no other solution, Vex replied firmly. The Drawback cannot be negotiated with. They cannot be fought. They are a force of nature, like a storm or a solar flare. We adapt and survive. No, Chen said simply. The chamber fell silent. No one contradicted the High Counselor, certainly not in such direct terms. I beg your pardon? Vex's stalks went rigid. I said no. Humanity will not be evacuating our colonies in the outer reaches. We will not surrender our homes to an insect swarm, no matter how large or dangerous. If the Drawback want our worlds, they'll have to take them from us. Krell's breathing tubes expanded in shock. Captain, you don't understand. The Drawback swarm destroyed the ancient civilization. They're millions of years old. They travel between galaxies. Their numbers are beyond counting. Each Drawback is the size of your human transport ships, and they can survive in the vacuum of space. Their bioweapons can strip a planet's atmosphere in days. They are extinction incarnate. Then we'll become extinction's nightmare, Chen replied calmly. We won't run. We can't. It's not in our nature. This is madness, Thon's crystalline body chimed in distress. You're a young species. Brave, perhaps, but foolish. The Drawback have never been defeated, never even slowed. You're speaking of suicide. Chen shook her head. We're speaking of survival. Real survival, not just postponing death. If the pattern continues as you describe, eventually the Drawback will consume everything. Maybe not in your lifetime or mine, but eventually. Someone has to stand. Someone has to say no more. If that someone is humanity, then so be it. The security officer beside Chen stepped forward. His name was Thomas Park, and his record indicated he'd served in human military conflicts. High Counselor, with respect, I think there's something you're not understanding about humans. We're pursuit predators. That's what we evolved as on our homeworld. Do you know what that means? Vex's stalks tilted in curiosity despite his obvious agitation. Park continued. It means we don't have the speed or strength to take down prey quickly, so we chase them. For hours. For days if necessary. We run them to exhaustion. We never stop. Never give up. Never let them rest. Most predators give up if the prey escapes initially. Humans don't. We track. We follow. We persist until our target simply can't run anymore. That's what you're all feeling when you look at us. You're seeing a species that doesn't know how to quit. This is why you terrify us, Krell said softly, understanding blooming in his mind. You're the species that doesn't accept the natural order, that fights the inevitable, that pursues when others would rest. Maybe, Chen acknowledged, but that's also why we'll face the Drawback. We can't do otherwise. It's not bravery or madness, it's just who we are. High Counselor Vex was quiet for a long moment. The Council cannot support you in this. We will not risk our forces against the Drawback. If you stand alone. We understand, Chen said. We're not asking you to fight with us. We're just informing you that we won't be abandoning our people. When the Drawback come, humanity will be waiting. The meeting adjourned shortly after, with no resolution beyond humanity's stated intention to resist. As the human delegation left, Krell found himself approaching Thon's station. They're really going to do it, he said. They're going to fight the Drawback swarm. Yes, Thon's crystalline form hummed thoughtfully. And I find myself curious about the outcome. Logic suggests they'll be destroyed. The Drawback have never been stopped. Yet something in my processing core suggests we may be about to witness something unprecedented. The birth of a legend, Krell agreed, or the extinction of a species too stubborn to know when they're beaten. Perhaps both, Thawne replied. I've accessed human cultural databases. They have thousands of stories about last stands, about facing impossible odds, about refusing to surrender even in the face of certain death. These stories are core to their identity. They celebrate failure if it comes from trying rather than accepting defeat. Krell watched the humans disappear from view. Then we'll witness whether their stories reflect a strength we don't understand or a fatal flaw that will doom them. In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Council watched with a mixture of morbid fascination and horror as humanity prepared for war. The humans didn't just fortify their existing colonies, they sent more ships, more people. Volunteers from Earth itself traveled to the outer reaches, knowing they were likely going to their deaths. The human news networks broadcast interviews with colonists who refused to evacuate. A farmer on New Terra spoke calmly about the crops he'd planted for next season. A teacher on Horizon Station discussed the school year curriculum. A construction worker on Outpost 7 showed off the building foundations he just poured. None of them mentioned leaving. They're insane, Ambassador Krell muttered as he watched the broadcasts. But even as he said it, he felt a strange emotion stirring in his warrior's heart. It might have been respect. The Dravak were coming, the galaxy watched, and humanity, that young species that terrified everyone for reasons they couldn't quite explain, was sharpening its teeth. The Dravak swarm emerged from the deep black between star systems like a biblical plague made manifest. Their vanguard alone numbered in the millions, each creature a nightmare of chitin and biomechanical evolution. They moved through space with purpose, their collective intelligence guiding them toward the first human colony in their path, New Terra, a farming world of 3 million souls. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched through long-range sensors and Ansible feeds. The Galactic Council had positioned observation platforms at a safe distance, documenting what they assumed would be the predictable destruction of human colonies. It was tragic, they told themselves, but it would serve as a lesson to other young species about accepting the natural order. Ambassador Krell sat in his private quarters aboard the Council observation ship, multiple screens displaying different angles of the impending battle. Beside him, Thawne's crystalline form refracted the light from the displays in rainbow patterns. The Dravak will reach New Terra's orbit in approximately 4 hours, Thawne announced. Human defensive forces are minimal, 300 military vessels. The Dravak vanguard alone outnumbers them 3,000 to 1. A slaughter, Krell agreed grimly. I wish they had listened, evacuated. Humanity could have survived as a species. Now we'll watch them die for nothing. But as the hours counted down, something unexpected began to happen. The human ships didn't form a defensive perimeter around New Terra. Instead, they moved outward, spreading across a vast distance. Their formation was strange, almost loose, nothing like the tight defensive clusters that military doctrines suggested. What are they doing? Thawne wondered aloud. That formation leaves gaps large enough for entire Dravak squadrons to pass through. On the surface of New Terra, the broadcast continued. Farmers were still in their fields, not evacuating, not hiding in bunkers, working, as if death itself wasn't descending from the sky. The Dravak vanguard hit the human formation like a tidal wave. The first human ships opened fire, their weapons flashing in the darkness. Krell watched as Dravak creatures died by the dozens, then hundreds, but the swarm kept coming. They swarmed over human vessels, tearing them apart with bioacidic weapons and sheer physical force. It's starting, Krell said softly. May the stars forgive us for watching this. But then the unexpected happened. As the Dravak pushed through the human line, the human ships didn't retreat. They didn't hold position. They pursued. They followed the Dravok into their own formations, firing constantly, ramming when their weapons ran dry, and when the ships were damaged beyond operation, the crews evacuated in armored suits and continued fighting in the vacuum of space itself. That's tactically absurd, Thawne chimed in confusion. They're abandoning any defensive structure. They're just attacking, constantly attacking. Pursuit predators, Krell remembered Park's words. They don't defend, they hunt. The battle evolved into something the galaxy had never seen before. Human ships used the Dravok's own numbers against them, leading segments of the swarm into each other, causing massive collisions. Human pilots performed maneuvers that should have been impossible, putting stress on their vessels that exceeded safety parameters by orders of magnitude. One pilot, a woman named Elena Rodriguez, flew her fighter directly into a Dravok bioship's intake port and detonated her ship's reactor core, destroying it from within. Her last transmission was calm, almost cheerful. "Got you, you ugly bastard. See you in hell." Krell's scales went cold. She'd been smiling when she said it. The Dravok adjusted, as they always did. They'd faced millions of species across countless galaxies. They began to adapt their formations, compensate for human tactics. But then the second wave of human ships arrived. These weren't military vessels. They were civilian ships, cargo haulers, mining vessels, personal transports, thousands of them, piloted by volunteers from across human space. They weren't even properly armed. They just rammed the Dravok again and again and again. "This can't be happening," Thawne said, his crystalline matrix vibrating with distress. "This is irrational, unsustainable. They're losing ships faster than they can replace them. The mathematics don't support this strategy." "You're thinking about this wrong," Krell found himself saying. "They're not trying to win a battle. They're trying to prove something. To us, to themselves, to the universe itself." On New Terra's surface, the farmers were still working, but now Krell understood why. They weren't in denial. They were making a statement. The Dravok had never encountered a species that simply refused to acknowledge them as an existential threat. Every other civilization had treated the swarm with appropriate fear. Humans treated them like a problem to solve, an obstacle to remove, an annoyance interrupting their daily lives. The Dravok swarm reached New Terra's orbit, but they didn't arrive as an overwhelming force. They arrived diminished, disorganized, and facing something they'd never encountered before. An enemy that didn't know when to stop fighting. The real surprise came when the Dravok attempted to deploy their bioweapons to strip the atmosphere. Human ships had positioned themselves in orbit, but not in the defensive pattern the Council expected. They'd created a grid, a net of ships that fired continuously at anything that tried to descend toward the planet. And when Dravok bioweapons did make it through, human ground forces were waiting. Krell watched in amazement as human soldiers fought Dravok infiltrators on the planet's surface. They didn't fight with the precision of the Vaxxan military or the technological superiority of the Methrans. They fought with a desperate, vicious creativity that turned every battlefield into chaos. One human squad used agricultural equipment as weapons. Farming machines became improvised war vehicles. Irrigation systems were repurposed to spray corrosive chemicals. Grain silos were detonated to create firestorms that consumed entire Dravok landing zones. "They're using their own infrastructure as weapons," Thawne observed. "They're willing to destroy what they built to defend it. That's paradoxical." "No," Krell corrected. "It's practical. They can rebuild infrastructure. They can't rebuild if they're dead. They understand priorities better than we thought." The battle for New Terra raged for 6 days. In that time, humanity lost nearly 40% of their defensive fleet. Thousands died. Entire cities on the planet's surface were damaged or destroyed. By every conventional metric, it was a catastrophic defeat. But the Dravok withdrew. For the first time in documented galactic history, the Dravok swarm encountered resistance severe enough to make them reconsider their approach. They pulled back to regroup, to reassess, to adapt to this new threat. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. They didn't win, Ambassador Thawne said slowly. The Dravak still outnumber them enormously. This was just one colony. The swarm will adapt and return with new tactics. You're missing the point, Krell replied. He was staring at the screens where humans on New Terra were already beginning cleanup and repair operations, already planting new crops in damaged fields, already rebuilding. They made the Dravak retreat. They made extinction itself pause and reconsider. Do you understand what that means? High Counselor Vex's voice came over the Ansible channel, addressing all observers. An emergency council session has been called. All ambassadors return to the central chamber immediately. We must discuss what we've witnessed. As Krell and Thawne made their way to the council ship's transit bay, Krell couldn't shake the images from his mind. Human pilots smiling as they flew suicide missions. Farmers working fields while battle raged overhead. Children in shelters singing songs to keep their spirits up. A species that simply refused to accept the inevitable. I think I understand now, he said to Thawne, why they terrify us. Why? The crystalline asked. Because they're proof that reality isn't fixed, that the natural order can be challenged, that the impossible is just something that hasn't been done yet. Every species in the galaxy has limits we accept, things we know we cannot do. Humans don't have those limits, not because they're stronger or smarter, but because they simply don't believe in them. Thawne was quiet for a moment. That is either the most terrifying thing I've ever heard, or the most inspiring. Yes, Krell agreed. Exactly, yes. The emergency council session was chaos. Ambassadors shouted over each other in dozens of languages, the translation matrix struggling to keep up. Some demanded humanity be censured for their reckless tactics. Others wanted to study human combat doctrines. A few, like Krell, simply wanted to understand. High Counselor Vex called for order, his ancient voice cutting through the noise. We have witnessed something unprecedented. The Dravak have withdrawn from a contested system. This has never happened before. We must understand why and what it means for the future. Captain Chen stood at the human platform, looking tired. Her uniform was rumpled, and Krell realized she hadn't slept since the battle ended. She'd been coordinating relief efforts on New Terra. The Dravak will return, Chen said simply. They're adapting, learning. They'll come back with new tactics, probably within weeks, and we'll fight them again and again and again, for as long as it takes. You're talking about eternal war, Ambassador Thawne said. Your casualties at New Terra were catastrophic. You cannot sustain that level of loss across dozens of worlds. Watch us, Chen replied. Not defiant, not boasting, just stating a fact. Why? Vex asked, and his voice carried genuine curiosity. Why persist in something so costly? Your species could evacuate to your core worlds, consolidate your territory, live peacefully in council space. Why choose this endless struggle? Chen smiled. It was tired, sad smile, but real. Because if we don't, who will? The Dravak have been terrorizing the galaxy for millions of years. Every time they come, civilizations surrender territory and hope they'll be satisfied. But they're never satisfied. They'll keep coming, keep consuming. Eventually, they'll reach the core worlds. Eventually, there will be nowhere left to run. Someone has to stand and say enough. Someone has to prove they can be fought. Even if it costs you everything? Krell asked. Especially then, Chen replied, because that's when it matters most. When the cost is high and the outcome uncertain, and every rational thought says to give up, that's when standing firm means something. That's when you discover what you're really made of. The chamber fell silent. Krell looked around at the assembled representatives and saw his own thoughts reflected in their expressions. Fear, respect, confusion, wonder, all mixed together in a complicated knot. Humanity requests Council support, Chen continued. Not military support, if that makes you uncomfortable, but supplies, medical aid, technical assistance. We're willing to be the sword that defends the galaxy, but we can't do it alone forever. Help us help you. Vex's stalks waved in agitation. This body does not make hasty decisions. We will adjourn and reconvene in 1 week's time. Each member civilization will consult with their governments. But as the session ended and ambassadors departed, Krell noticed something. They were talking, not arguing, discussing. The idea had been planted. Humanity had done something impossible, and now other species were wondering what else might be possible. Krell approached the human platform as Chen prepared to leave. "Captain, a moment of your time." She turned, her expression open and curious. "Of course, Ambassador Krell. Your people suffered greatly at New Terra, thousands dead, cities damaged. Do you really believe it was worth it?" Chen considered the question carefully. "Every person who died at New Terra chose to be there. We don't conscript. Everyone who fought, who stayed, who worked those fields while battle raged overhead, they made a choice. They decided that some things are worth fighting for, worth dying for. Was it worth it?" She paused. "Ask me again in 100 years. If humanity is still standing, if the Dravak have learned that the galaxy has teeth, if other species have found the courage to defend their homes, then yes, it will have been worth it." Krell's scales rippled with emotion he couldn't quite name. "You're either the bravest species I've ever met or the most foolish." "Why not both?" Chen smiled. "We contain multitudes." As she left, Krell remained standing in the empty chamber, thinking about courage and foolishness and the thin line between them. The Dravak returned to New Terra exactly 19 days after their initial withdrawal. This time they came with adapted tactics, having learned from their first encounter with humanity. They didn't commit their entire force at once. Instead, they probed with smaller groups, testing human responses, looking for weaknesses to exploit. They found none. Not because humans had no weaknesses, but because humanity had spent those 19 days transforming New Terra into something the galaxy had never seen before. A fortress world built not by cowering behind walls, but by turning every aspect of civilization into a potential weapon. Krell watched from the Council observation platform as the second battle began. This time, other species were watching too. Not just the Council ambassadors, but citizens across the galaxy. Human broadcasts had been shared through Ansible networks. The story of New Terra's stand had spread like wildfire through civilizations that had spent millions of years accepting the Dravak as an unstoppable force. "They've militarized the orbital agriculture platforms," Thawne observed, his crystalline form processing the tactical data. "Those structures were designed to grow food. Now they're weapons platforms disguised as farms." Krell hummed in agreement. "Look at the civilian ships. They're not random this time. They're coordinated, moving in patterns." The Dravak's adapted tactics met an adapted defense. But where the Dravak had spent 19 days analyzing and planning, humans had spent the same time building, training, and preparing with manic intensity that bordered on obsession. The agricultural platforms did indeed serve as disguised weapons, but they were also still growing food. Humans refused to abandon their civilian infrastructure, even in war. They'd simply merged the two purposes, defense and daily life, survival and normalcy, war and peace, existing simultaneously. The battle was different from the first engagement, more organized on both sides. The Dravak used hit-and-run tactics, trying to exhaust human resources. But humans had apparently been expecting this. They'd stockpiled supplies, positioned reserves, and created a rotation system that kept fresh forces in the battle while allowing others to rest. "They're learning," Ambassador Thawne said. "Not just learning, they're learning faster than the Dravak can adapt." "How is that possible?" The Dravak have millions of years of evolutionary memory. Humans have been in space for what, 400 years? 372, Krell corrected. But you're thinking about it wrong again. The Dravak learn through adaptation, biological evolution. It's powerful, but slow. Humans learn through culture. They can change tactics, not over generations, but over days. They can share knowledge instantly across their entire species. As if to prove his point, Krell watched human forces execute a maneuver he'd never seen before. A squadron of ships deliberately allowed themselves to be surrounded by Dravak bioships, then detonated a new type of weapon. Not an explosive, some kind of electromagnetic pulse that disrupted the Dravak's biological coordination systems. The surrounded Dravak ships went dead, floating helplessly in space. Human recovery vessels moved in immediately, capturing them, studying them. They're learning from the Dravak, Thawne said in amazement. They're treating this as a research opportunity. Of course they are, Krell replied. Why wouldn't they? If you're going to fight something for the foreseeable future, you'd better understand it as thoroughly as possible. The second battle for New Terra lasted 3 days. The Dravak withdrew again, having lost more forces than they destroyed. Not a decisive defeat, but another retreat, another pause for adaptation, another admission that humanity was a problem that required serious consideration. But something else happened during those 3 days that would echo across the galaxy. Other species started to arrive at New Terra. Not to fight, not yet, but to watch, to learn, to see if humanity's resistance was sustainable or simply an impressive but doomed last gasp. The first to arrive was a Vaxon battle group led by Commander Thax. He was a decorated veteran, and when his ships took position near the human defense perimeter, every species in the galaxy held its breath. Krell received an answerable communication from Thax directly. Ambassador, I need you to understand. I'm not here under orders from the Empire. I'm here because I'm a warrior, and I've never seen anything like what these humans are doing. I want to know if it's real, if they can sustain it. And if they can, Krell asked, then maybe it's time the Vaxon Empire remembered what we were before we became civilized and started retreating from threats. Within a week, ships from 24 species had arrived at New Terra. Most were just observing, but some, like Commander Thax, were asking questions, requesting meetings with human military leaders, studying their tactics. The Galactic Council watched nervously as an unprecedented coalition began to form. Not a formal alliance, nothing so structured, just a gathering of those who'd seen humanity stand and wondered if they too could learn to fight the inevitable. Captain Chen gave a broadcast address that was transmitted across human space and picked up by alien observers. She stood on the repaired surface of New Terra, fields of growing crops visible behind her. We've been asked why we fight, she said, why we don't evacuate, why we accept such terrible costs. The answer is simple. We fight because we're human, and humans don't abandon their homes. We fight because someone has to, and it might as well be us. We fight because the Dravak have been terrorizing the galaxy for millions of years, and it's time someone told them, no. She paused and her expression grew more serious. But we're not fighting for humanity alone. We're fighting for every species that has ever surrendered territory to the Dravak. Every civilization that has ever accepted extinction as inevitable. Every child who has ever looked at the stars and wondered if there's a place for them out there. We're fighting to prove that the galaxy doesn't belong to the Dravak. It belongs to those who have the courage to defend it. It was, by diplomatic standards, an incredibly presumptuous statement. Humanity was claiming to fight on behalf of species that hadn't asked for their protection. The Council should have been outraged. Instead, across the galaxy, billions of beings felt something stir in their hearts, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Hope. Ambassador Thawne visited Krell in his quarters after Chen's broadcast. The crystalline structure was flickering with agitated light patterns. This is dangerous, Thawne said without preamble. Humanity is inspiring other species to resistance. If this spreads, if others begin to fight the Dravok, the casualties will be catastrophic. The Dravok will escalate. The war could consume the entire galaxy. Krell was quiet for a moment. You're right. It's dangerous. People will die. Many people. Perhaps entire civilizations. But answer me this, Thawne. What's the alternative? We keep retreating forever? We keep surrendering territory and hoping the Dravok will be satisfied. How many more systems will we lose before there's nowhere left to retreat to? The Methrin projections suggest we have at least 10,000 years before the Dravok consume enough territory to threaten the core worlds. 10,000 years, Krell repeated. And then what? We retreat again? And again until the last inhabited planet is surrounded and there's nowhere left to run? That's not survival, Thawne. That's a slow extinction. Humanity is offering something different, a chance to fight, maybe to win, certainly to go down swinging if we must. Thawne's crystalline structure stopped flickering. You've decided to support them. The Vaxxan Empire hasn't made any official decision yet, but personally, yes. I'm going to recommend we support humanity, not with military forces, not yet, but with supplies, technology, intelligence. If they're willing to be the shield that protects the galaxy, the least we can do is help them stay standing. The Council will never approve it. The Council doesn't need to approve it. Individual civilizations can make their own decisions. That's the beauty of how the Galactic Council works. We coordinate, we don't control. Over the next weeks, a strange transformation began across the galaxy. It wasn't a formal military alliance. It wasn't even official support. But quietly, discreetly, resources began flowing to human colonies. Medical supplies appeared in storage facilities. Technical blueprints for advanced shielding systems were leaked through unsecured channels. Food shipments arrived with no sender listed. The Galactic Council held session after session, debating what this meant. High Counselor Vex tried to maintain order, to preserve the old ways, the careful balance that had kept the galaxy stable for millennia. But the galaxy was changing, whether he approved or not. Humanity had done something unprecedented. They'd shown the galaxy that the old rules could be broken, that the natural order wasn't immutable, that even the Dravok could be made to hesitate. And once people saw that the impossible was possible, there was no putting that knowledge back in the box. The Dravok came to New Terra a third time, and this time everything changed. They arrived not with their usual swarm tactics, but with a massive bioconstruct the size of a small moon. The scouts called it a harvester, a living weapon the Dravok deployed when they wanted to consume a world completely. Krell watched from the observation platform as the thing entered the system. It was beautiful in a horrifying way, its bioluminescent structures pulsing with alien light, its countless appendages reaching out like the arms of some cosmic horror. "That's a planet killer," Commander Thax said over the Ansible channel. His Vaxxan battle group had moved closer to New Terra over the past weeks, ostensibly still just observing. "I've seen records of them, ancient records from when my people tried to fight the Dravok, before we learned better. That thing will drain New Terra's atmosphere in hours once it gets in position." "How long until it reaches optimal range?" Krell asked. 48 hours at current speed. On the surface of New Terra, Captain Chen called an emergency meeting with her command staff and the representatives of the other species who had gathered in the system. Krell watched the broadcast, seeing the exhaustion on Chen's face. She'd been fighting for weeks with minimal rest. "We all see what's coming," Chen said without preamble. "That harvester is beyond anything we've faced before. Our projections suggest we can't destroy it with conventional weapons. And even if we could, the resource expenditure would leave us defenseless against the regular swarm forces that will follow it." "So you're evacuating?" one of the alien observers asked. "No," Chen replied. We're adapting. We've been studying Dravak biology since the first battle. We've learned some things. Their bioconstructs are incredibly resilient, but they have a weakness. They need coordination signals from the core swarm intelligence. Disrupt those signals strongly enough, and the harvester becomes just a very large, very confused piece of meat floating in space. Commander Thax leaned forward. You're talking about a direct assault on the swarm intelligence itself. That's suicide. The intelligence is protected by millions of Dravak bioships. You'd never reach it. Chen smiled. It was not a comforting expression. Not alone we wouldn't. But we're not alone anymore, are we? There are 47 ships from 13 different species in this system. Most of you are here to observe, but some of you are here because you're tired of running, tired of accepting the Dravak as an unchangeable fact of existence. She brought up a tactical display. This is our plan. It requires cooperation, sacrifice, and very possibly it will fail spectacularly. But if it works, we won't just save New Terra, we'll prove that the Dravak can be beaten, really beaten, not just delayed, not just survived, defeated. Krell felt his breathing tubes constrict as he watched the plan unfold on his screens. It was insane, brilliant and completely insane. It required perfect timing, absolute trust between species that barely knew each other, and a willingness to risk everything on a single coordinated strike. It was the most human thing he'd ever seen. Commander Thax was the first to speak. The Vaxen are warriors. We've forgotten that over the centuries of retreat and careful diplomacy. But we're warriors. And warriors don't watch while others fight battles that matter. My battle group will participate. One by one, other species representatives joined in. Not all of them. Some ships quietly left the system, choosing to remain observers rather than participants. But enough stayed. Enough chose to fight. Thawne contacted Krell privately. This is madness. Yes, Krell agreed. If they fail, it will be the greatest military disaster in modern galactic history. Multiple species losing forces in a coordinated assault. The Council will collapse from the political fallout. Yes. But if they succeed, Krell interrupted, we'll have proven that the galaxy can defend itself, that we're not helpless prey waiting for extinction. That's worth the risk. Thawne was quiet for a long moment. I've contacted my homeworld. A crystalline science vessel is en route. We're not warriors, but we can provide advanced sensors and coordination systems. If this mad plan is going to work, it needs perfect timing. Krell felt something fierce and warm spread through his chest. Pride, not for his own people, but for the alliance that was forming, for the species that were finding their courage. The 48 hours before the Harvester reached New Terra became a frenzy of preparation. Human engineers worked alongside Vaxen weapons specialists. Crystalline scientists coordinated with alien tacticians. Language barriers and cultural differences were overcome with desperate urgency. And through it all, humanity maintained its strange, dual nature. Even as they prepared for potentially the most important battle in galactic history, the farmers on New Terra kept working their fields. Schools remained open. Life continued because humans refused to let war be their only existence. I finally understand, Krell told Thawne as they watched the preparations, why they terrify us. Tell me. Because they're proof that we've been lying to ourselves. For millions of years, we've told ourselves that some things can't be changed, that some enemies can't be fought, that survival means accepting our limitations. Humans don't accept that. They show us that our limitations are often just failures of imagination, failures of will. And that's terrifying because it means we've been wrong about everything. The Harvester entered weapon range of New Terra exactly 48 hours after its arrival in the system, just as predicted. It began its deployment sequence, massive biotentacles reaching toward the planet to begin atmospheric extraction. That's when the strike force hit it. Human ships led the charge, their weapons modified based on weeks of studying Dravak biology. Behind them came Vaxon heavy cruisers, their warrior species finally remembering what war meant. Crystalline vessels provided sensor coverage and coordination. Dozens of other species contributed what they could. The Dravak swarm reacted instantly, millions of bioships moving to protect their harvester, and the central intelligence directing it. The space around New Terra became a churning chaos of conflict. Krell watched as human pilots executed maneuvers that seemed impossible. Ships pushed past their design tolerances, crews enduring G-forces that should have killed them, all to create openings for their allies to exploit. Commander Thax led his battle group in a direct assault on the Dravak screening forces, his Vaxon warriors fighting with a ferocity that Krell hadn't seen from his species in centuries. They'd been soft, he realized. They'd all been soft. Humanity was teaching them to be hard again. The crystalline science vessel, guided by Thawne himself, positioned itself in a dangerously exposed location to provide real-time coordination data. Crystalline logic processing millions of tactical variables per second, identifying patterns in the Dravak swarm behavior, and transmitting targeting solutions. "They're adapting," one of the human commanders shouted over the tactical channel. "The swarm is learning our patterns." "Then we change the patterns," Captain Chen replied calmly. "All forces, execute Randomization Protocol 7. Make them react to us instead of us reacting to them." The battle evolved from a coordinated assault into organized chaos. Each ship began operating semi-independently, creating unpredictable movements and attacks that the Dravak couldn't easily adapt to. It was the opposite of traditional military doctrine, which emphasized coordination and predictability among allied forces. It was perfectly human. "The harvester is still operational," Thawne reported, "and we're taking heavy casualties. 18 ships destroyed, 42 damaged. We can't sustain this." "We don't need to sustain it," Chen replied. "We just need to create an opening. One opening. That's all. Strike team, are you in position?" A new voice came over the channel, a human pilot named Sarah Kim, leading a small squadron of fast attack craft. "We're here, Captain, right where you said we'd need to be, but there are approximately 10,000 Dravak bioships between us and the swarm intelligence." "Then you'd better get moving," Chen said, "because in about 30 seconds, those 10,000 bioships are going to have bigger problems." What happened next would be analyzed and debated by military historians for generations. The entire strike force, every ship from every species, simultaneously broke off their current engagements and focused fire on a single point in the Dravak formation. Not the harvester, not the swarm intelligence, just one specific, dense cluster of Dravak bioships. The concentrated firepower punched a hole through the swarm, and Sarah Kim's strike team shot through it like bullets. The Dravak reacted instantly, redirecting forces to intercept the strike team. But that meant pulling ships away from other positions, creating new holes, which the rest of the Allied force immediately exploited. "It's working!" Commander Thax roared. "They're fragmenting their formation to chase the strike team." "All ships maintain pressure," Chen ordered. "Keep them divided. Don't let them regroup." Krell watched in amazement as the battle transformed. The Dravak, who had overwhelmed countless civilizations through sheer numbers and coordination, were being forced into reactive positions. They were being hunted by the very species they'd always seen as prey. Sarah Kim's strike team reached the swarm intelligence. It was a massive bio-construct, heavily armored and defended by layers of specialized Dravak warriors. Kim's ships didn't even slow down. They just fired everything they had and rammed directly into the intelligence's organic structure. The electromagnetic pulse weapons the humans had developed detonated simultaneously, and the effect rippled across the entire Dravak swarm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the harvester stopped moving. The millions of Dravak bioships went still. The coordination that made them so effective simply vanished. "Did it work?" someone asked over the channel. The Dravak began to retreat. Not in their usual organized withdrawal, in chaos, individual bioships breaking off in random directions. The swarm intelligence had been damaged, not destroyed, but disrupted enough that it could no longer coordinate the vast numbers under its control. The harvester, no longer receiving direction, began to drift aimlessly. A massive, useless biological construct floating in the void. The combined Allied force had won. The celebration was subdued. Too many had died. Sarah Kim and her entire strike team were gone, sacrificed to reach the swarm intelligence. Over 60 ships had been destroyed, and countless crew members had been killed or wounded. But they had won. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a Dravak harvester had been neutralized. A major swarm assault had been defeated, not through retreat, but through direct confrontation. Captain Chen's voice came over the open channel, speaking to all the ships in the system. To every species represented here today, thank you. You didn't have to fight. You could have remained observers, but you chose to stand with us. That choice matters. It changes everything. In the Galactic Council observation vessel, Krell stood silently, his forearms trembling slightly. Beside him, Thon's crystalline structure was refracting light in patterns that indicated deep emotion. "We did it," Thon said softly. "We actually did it." "Humanity did it," Krell corrected. "We just helped. They're the ones who showed us it was possible." High Counselor Vex called an emergency session of the full Galactic Council within hours of the battle's conclusion. Representatives from every member civilization filled the Great Chamber, and for once, there was no grandstanding or political maneuvering. Everyone wanted to understand what had happened and what it meant. Captain Chen stood at the human platform, still in her combat uniform, still covered in the grime of battle. She looked exhausted, but unbowed. "The Dravak can be beaten," she said simply. "That's what today proved. They're not an unstoppable force of nature. They're biological constructs with weaknesses that can be exploited. They rely on coordination that can be disrupted. They operate on patterns that can be predicted and countered. Yes, they're dangerous. Yes, fighting them is costly, but it can be done." "At what cost?" an ambassador from a cautious species asked. "Your casualties were substantial. If every system defends itself this way, we'll lose millions of lives. And if we don't defend ourselves, we'll lose everything eventually," Chen replied. "The Dravak don't stop. They don't negotiate. They consume. Every system we surrender to them is gone forever. At least in fighting we have a chance. We can learn, adapt, become better at opposing them. Today we neutralized a harvester. Next time, maybe we can do it faster, with fewer losses. The time after that, maybe we won't need a suicide mission to reach their intelligence nodes. We improve by trying, not by running." Silence filled the chamber as her words sank in. High Counselor Vex's stalks waved slowly. "You're asking the galaxy to go to war. A real war, not the limited conflicts we've seen in recent millennia. A war that could last generations. I'm asking the galaxy to choose survival over slow extinction," Chen corrected. "War is just the method. The goal is living free of the constant threat that the Dravak represent. Building civilizations that don't have to calculate which colonies to abandon next time the swarm appears." "It's madness," someone muttered. "Maybe," Chen agreed, "but it's a madness with purpose, with hope. That's more than we had before." Ambassador Krell stepped forward from his position. "The Vaxan Empire wishes to make a formal statement. Today, forces under Commander Thax participated in the defense of New Terra. They did so without official authorization. Commander Thax acted on his own initiative based on his assessment of the situation." The chamber went silent. This could be a condemnation, a disavowal of Thax's actions. Having reviewed his actions and the battle results, the Vaxan Empire has decided to promote Commander Thax and officially commit forces to the defense of border regions against Dravak incursions. We're not declaring war on the Dravok, but we will no longer retreat automatically from their presence. We will defend our territory, and we will assist allies who choose to do the same. It was like a dam breaking. One by one, other ambassadors stepped forward. Not all of them. Some civilizations chose to maintain their traditional approach of retreat and survival. But enough stepped forward. The crystalline, the methrons, a dozen other species large and small. They weren't forming a military alliance. That would take years of negotiation and bureaucracy. But they were making a choice to stand, to fight, to believe that the galaxy didn't have to accept the Dravok as an unchangeable constant. Humanity had shown them it was possible. Now they were choosing to make it real. The Galactic Council session lasted 18 hours. By the end, a new framework had been established. The Dravok Defense Coalition. Not a formal alliance, but a coordination network. Species would maintain their sovereignty, but share intelligence, technology, and tactics related to fighting the Dravok. Humanity, as the species that had initiated this change, was given a central role in coordination. Not because they demanded it, but because every other species insisted. They'd proven they understood how to fight the Dravok. They'd earned the right to help guide others. As the session concluded and ambassadors began to depart, Krell found himself standing beside Captain Chen. "You changed the galaxy today," he told her. "I want you to understand that. For millions of years we've operated under certain assumptions, that the Dravok were unstoppable, that survival meant retreat, that the natural order couldn't be challenged. You've destroyed those assumptions." Chen smiled tiredly. "We just did what we had to do, what anyone would do if they couldn't run." "No," Krell said firmly, "that's where you're wrong. Most species, when they can't run, they accept defeat. They die with dignity. Humanity fights, even when fighting seems hopeless, especially then. That's what makes you terrifying. That's what makes you inspiring. You simply don't know how to give up." "It's not always a good trait," Chen admitted. "Sometimes we hold on to things we should let go. Fight battles we can't win. Refuse to accept reality." "And sometimes," Krell countered, "you change reality through sheer stubborn refusal to accept it as unchangeable." Today was one of those times. Chen looked around the great chamber, at the departing ambassadors, at the representatives of dozens of species. "Do you think it will last, this coalition, or will fear eventually win out again?" Krell considered the question carefully. "The Dravok will keep coming. There will be losses, setbacks. Some species will lose their courage and retreat to the old ways. But I think enough have seen the truth now, that the Dravok can be fought, that the galaxy has teeth when it chooses to bear them. You can't unlearn that knowledge. It's out there now, spreading through the galactic consciousness. Hope is infectious, Captain. You've started an epidemic." Over the following months, the galaxy transformed. The change wasn't dramatic or sudden. There was no great declaration of unity or triumphant speeches about a new age. But slowly, steadily, things shifted. Human colonies in the outer reaches stopped being isolated outposts and became fortress worlds. Not just military fortifications, but communities designed from the ground up to be resilient, to fight if necessary, but also to live regardless of the threat. Other species began to adopt human tactics, not wholesale copying, but adaptation. Each civilization brought its own strengths to the problem of fighting the Dravok. The Vaxon brought warrior discipline. The crystalline brought analytical precision. The Methrons contributed advanced technology. The Dravok kept coming. They attacked human worlds and the worlds of humanity's allies. They adapted to new tactics and weapons. They were, after all, millions of years old and had consumed countless galaxies. They weren't going to be defeated by one battle or one species, but they weren't winning anymore either. Each engagement taught the Allied forces something new. Each battle refined tactics and revealed weaknesses. Losses remained heavy, but they were balanced by victories. Territory was held rather than surrendered. The galaxy learned to fight. Krell, now promoted to a senior position in the Vaxon Diplomatic Corps, attended a ceremony on New Terra 1 year after the first battle. They were dedicating a memorial to those who had died defending the planet. Sarah Kim's name was engraved prominently, along with thousands of others, human and alien names side by side. Captain Chen stood at the podium, no longer looking quite so exhausted. She'd aged visibly over the past year, but there was a strength to her now that went beyond physical resilience. "We gather today to remember those who stood when others counseled retreat," she said, "who fought when others declared the battle impossible, who believed that the galaxy belonged to those willing to defend it, not to those with the most teeth or the oldest claim." She paused, looking at the assembled crowd, humans and aliens together, veterans and civilians, the young and the old. The war against the Dravak isn't over. It may never be over. They're patient and persistent and millions of years old. But we're no longer just surviving their attacks. We're pushing back, taking territory they've held for millennia, proving that even the oldest force in the galaxy can be challenged by those brave enough to try. Krell stood in the crowd listening. Beside him, Commander Thax stood at attention, his Vaxon military bearing perfect. Nearby, Thon's crystalline structure caught the sunlight and scattered it in rainbow patterns. "Do you ever wonder," Thax asked quietly, "what would have happened if the humans had listened to us? If they'd evacuated when we told them the Dravak were unstoppable?" "Yes," Krell replied. "We'd all still be retreating, still surrendering systems every few centuries, still pretending that slow extinction was the same as survival. The humans saved us," Thon added, "not through superior technology or overwhelming force, through sheer, stubborn refusal to accept the universe as it was presented to them." "That's humanity," Krell agreed. "They look at impossible situations and see problems to solve, challenges to overcome. They can't help themselves. It's in their nature." Chen finished her speech and stepped down from the podium. The memorial ceremony continued, but Krell found himself approaching the human captain. "A word, Captain?" "Of course, Ambassador." They walked together through the rebuilt sections of the city. New buildings stood where damaged ones had been. Fields grew where battlefields had raged. Life continuing despite everything. "I want to thank you," Krell said, "personally, not as a Vaxon representative, but as someone who lived his entire life believing certain things were impossible. You showed me I was wrong." Chen smiled. "We just did what we had to do." "No," Krell said firmly. "You did what everyone else was too afraid to try. There's a difference, and because of that difference, my children will grow up in a galaxy that fights back, that refuses to accept extinction as inevitable. That's a gift beyond measure." They stood together in silence for a moment, watching the city bustle with activity, humans and aliens working side by side, building, growing, living. "The Dravak will come again," Chen said softly. "Probably soon. They're still out there, still dangerous." "Let them come," Krell replied, and he was surprised by the fierce certainty in his own voice. "The galaxy has learned to bare its teeth. Humanity taught us how. Now we're ready." As the sun set on New Terra, Krell realized something profound. He was no longer afraid of humans. The terror he'd felt that first day in the council chamber was gone, replaced by something else: respect, gratitude, and perhaps, if he was honest with himself, a bit of that same stubborn determination that made humanity so terrifying in the first place. They'd taught the galaxy that the impossible was just something that hadn't been done yet, that the natural order could be challenged, that even extinction itself could be fought. In doing so, they'd saved everyone, including themselves. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly how it should be.